Giles, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Pray podcast today.
You're welcome. It's great to be here.
So, can you give myself and the audience a little bit background about who you are and what you do?
Sure, absolutely. So my name's Giles. I am the Director of Campaigns here at UK Finance. So UK Finance is the trade body for the banking and finance industry here in the UK. We've got around 300 members across the kind of banking and finance world, sort of high street banks, and sort of kind of a broader range of different finance providers as well. And one of the campaigns that we run on behalf of the industry is called Take Five to Stop Fraud. And so we're all about trying to help protect people from fraud and scams.
Awesome. And how did you get into the field? Was it something that you have longed to do since your youth, or was it just kind of the natural progression of your career?
Yeah, a bit of a natural progression. I've worked in sort of communications for a number of years, so but it's definitely a real passion in terms of the sort of fraud awareness campaign, because it's something which is really helping people in their day-to-day lives, and every person that we can help prevent being a victim of fraud is a great thing. Both in terms of, we know that the huge sort of financial and emotional impact that fraud can have on people. And of course, that's not forgetting the fact that the stolen money is in the hands of criminals as well. So we're stopping that money going into on to fund other serious crimes too. So it's a very worthwhile thing to do. So it's something I'm really kind of proud of as well.
Yeah, I'm super on board with that mission. Anything that I can do to help someone from losing their life savings is a really good day for me.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about the anti-fraud campaign. What is it, and when did you guys start it? And let's get into the nitty-gritty on it.
So Take Five to Stop Fraud first launched back in 2016, and it was really in response to a kind of rise in fraud and scams here in the UK, and particularly what we call authorized push payment fraud. So that's where the customer is being tricked by the criminal essentially to send a payment themselves. So to go into their online banking and transfer money over to, obviously what they don't realize is in fact the criminal. And so as in kind of response to that rise, we launched the campaign to give people sort of straightforward, simple, impartial advice on how to stay safe. And it's evolved over the years since 2016. And the core message of the campaign that is very much around getting people to stop and think. Often people, when we've spoken to people who've been victims of fraud, and afterwards, sometimes they think, you know what, the second I hung up that phone or replied to that text message or email, they thought, oh, something wasn't quite right. But it's after the event. They've already,
Yeah.
they've already been ensnared by the criminal. And so what we really want to do is get to people to stop as soon as they get asked about that, sort of potentially, ask for information, ask for money, to stop and think and go, actually, you know what, this doesn't quite feel right. And then give people, sort of empower them to have the ability to say, to challenge and say, actually, no, I'm not going to give you that piece of information, that I'm not going to send you that money. I don't know who you are. And I want to make myself sure before I do anything that you are actually the genuine organization that you're claiming to be from.
Yeah. I love that. So, what are the current kind of the messaging around the fraud itself? What's the current trigger? Is it tax refunds? Is it uh, kind of the tech support scams where, oh, we've accidentally sent you too much money. Can you send us money back? What's kind of the current trend there?
So in terms of the number of cases, the biggest one is what we call purchase scams. So this is often where the customer is tricked really into buying something which simply doesn't exist, and that can be a whole range of things. Whether that's something advertised, usually these start on online, often on social media, and something is being advertised for sale. And it simply is bogus, and whether that's sort of electronics, so any kind of high in demand products, so it can be holidays, things like that, tickets, for sold out gigs, those sorts of things, where there's a real demand for them, and sort of the criminal will go there, sort of advertise this service, this good, this product, and then give their details of where the money needs to be sent. Customer makes the payment, and then obviously unfortunately nothing actually ever arrives. So
Yeah.
in terms of numbers of cases, that purchase scams makes up the good half of all types of authorized push payment scams. But generally, the kind of case the losses in those cases are smaller.
Yeah.
So where we see the biggest losses is often in what we call impersonation scams and investment scams. So an impersonation scam is where the criminal pretends to be someone they're not really, and that might be the bank, their customers in a
Yeah.
bank. It might be like police, for example. It might be a delivery scam, and that's often we saw a lot of that during COVID. And with lockdown, a lot of people doing their online shopping, a lot of people getting stuff delivered to their
Yeah.
homes, and fake text messages from a delivery company saying, "Oh, sorry, we missed you," or "You're due a delivery, but there's an outstanding payment to be made on it. You just got to click on this link." And provide a few details, and we'll get that parcel straight to you. And which is totally understandable. People don't necessarily can't quite remember what it is they bought,
Yeah.
or expecting a parcel anyway, and it's coming through. So that was something we see a lot of, and then investment scams where the criminals trying to trick people into investing in bogus investments, really. So that could be anything from cryptocurrency scams, which I'm sure you hear a
Oh
lot
yeah.
of. It could be gold, it could be fine wines, it can be anything really that they're basically trying to say, oh, we'll get you a huge return. We can make you quick money here. Just invest in this. There's always some element of pressure. You've got
Yeah.
to invest now. This deal is only available today. It's a special deal for you. Invest now, and sadly, that can trick people into parting with their money.
Yeah. Those are the ones that particularly make me sad when people have invested large amounts of their retirement or taken a second mortgage on their house in order to participate in these investment scams.
Absolutely, and they can last quite. These often some of these scams can last. Over a long period of time. Particularly romance scams we see where that takes over a number of months. The criminal is grooming their victim really, and they're making them feel that they really are in that relationship, and bit by bit trying to trick them into or persuade them into transferring sometimes smaller sums of money to start with, and then larger and larger sums eventually it comes down the line, and saying, oh, I'm coming over to the UK, you just need to pay for that flight, and
Yeah.
you hear stories of people waiting at the airport for somebody that never arrives, and it's only then that they realize that it's a scam.
Ah, that's awful. So when it comes to the payment scams, are these usually attempted to transfers through the bank account, or is it through peer-to-peer payment apps?
For the types of scams that our members see, so banks and others, that is generally through for authorized push payments. It's through their bank account. So
Hmm.
it's usually a payment made either via online banking, mobile banking, or sometimes over the telephone. But yeah, but through their bank account. But we do also see a lot of fraud still occurring on cards as well, often in that sort of what we call unauthorized fraud. So where the criminal has stolen the card details and goes on to buy something online, for example, with stolen card details.
And I'm going to make the assumption because I'm U.S. centric, so I think in basis of U.S. laws and processes. In the UK, is it basically similar to the US in that when you do a push transaction, it's effectively the same as giving somebody cash, and that you don't have the ability to reverse the transaction at a later date?
That's correct. Yeah, exactly. So once the payment is made, there isn't a sort of button to undo that. I mean, obviously, as soon as if somebody does realizes that they've sent money in a scam, to contacting their bank straight away, and the bank will always do everything they can to trace the stolen funds, put a freeze on that, and get it back to the customer. But obviously, money often moves very, very quickly. The criminal doesn't simply move it from account A to B. It's on from B out to C, D, E, and
Yeah.
more very quickly to try and cashed out as quickly as possible to steal the money as fast as possible. So you're right. It is often through that bank to bank transfer.
Yeah, I had it was just talking with somebody this past week who had gotten one of those. Their finance person had gotten the email saying, "Hey, can you change my payment, my bank account for payments? Um, no rush, just whenever you can do it. And the next time you send a payment, just send it to that account." And they turned out to be really, really lucky in that no payment was sent to that account for like 3 months. And so when it came time for having a payment, he's like, "Hey, I didn't get the payment." She's like, "Well, I sent it to the this account." Well, I don't have an account at that bank. and,
Yeah,
and and they turned out to be really fortunate is that the receiving bank had already shut down the account for fraud. So they're like, "Yeah, you'll get your money back. It's just going to take some time for it to work its way back through the system." But like you said, those accounts often get shut down relatively quickly.
absolutely, yes. And we see the same exactly. We call it sort of invoice and mandate fraud, and those examples, both for businesses where we see business payments where exactly a supplier, well, the fraudster impersonates a supplier, phones up and says, "Oh, I need to change my payment details."
Yeah,
But we also see it for consumers too, where they might be the worst often sometimes with house purchases, for example,
yeah.
where somehow the criminals manage to infiltrate a lawyer's email system, for example, and emails to say, "Oh, I've changed my the bank account details. You need to transfer the money for the house purchase here." And
Oh,
obviously, those are huge sums of money
yeah.
involved there. And same thing. Sometimes the first that someone notices when they speak to their solicitor and realize that, well, I sent you the money. Why is it not there? And they realize what's happened.
Oh, that's awful. So you talked about like the second point being kind of challenging the person that you're dealing with. What does that look like, and what are you coaching people to do there?
Yeah, so that's the idea behind that very much is giving that sort of empowering people uh, to say it's okay to refuse, ignore, and reject requests, really. So I think there's very much as the British sort of nature is to be very, helpful and polite, and that we don't like saying no. If someone asks for information, the natural way is to try and help them and say yes. So I think there's something in that kind of British psyche about reversing that and thinking, actually, you know what, it's okay to say no, it's okay to stop. So that rejecting, refusing, sort of ignoring, if there's a phone call from somebody saying, "Oh, I'm calling from your bank. We've spotted something suspicious on your account. We just want to take you through some security questions." Actually, if it is generally your bank, they'll be happy if you say, "You know what, I'm not sure that's correct. I'm going to hang up and I'm going to phone you back on a number that I know to be accurate. The number on the back of your bank card, the one on their official website, for example. Only a criminal there is going to be pressurizing you to say, "No, no, you've got to stay on the line. You've got to do this now." And other genuine organizations will be the same.
Yeah,
And it does feel a bit awkward. And I'm in that same. If I get a call out of the blue from somebody and then they say, "Oh, I'm just going to have to take you through security," and it does feel awkward. You feel quite polite saying, "Well, sorry, you phoned me. I'm not sure why I'm suddenly going to start revealing personal information about myself." But once you've done it once or twice, it feels more natural, and generally they're always happy to say, "Actually, it's okay. We know that you might not want to be able to give me that information now." And you check out the number yourself and call them back, and then you can deal with them, and you're sure that you are dealing with who they say they are.
yeah. I've definitely had both of those experiences where someone called claiming to be from a bank, and I'm like, well, I don't know who you are. Can you give me your extension number and I'll call you back? Well, I no, no, we need to deal with this right now. I'm like, no.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And then I've had the other side where the person's like, yep, I perfectly understand. I'm at extension. Da, da, da. Go ahead, call the number on the back of your card. Call it on, call the number on your statement. That's the right thing to do. I'm like, oh,
Exactly.
okay.
Yeah, and then you think, well, that sounds like a genuine organization. They're going to be, that's the right answer. I mean, I've had scam calls myself from, the HMRC in the UK, which is the tax office here, where I get a call claiming that there's a warrant out for my arrest,
Yeah,
and I've got to pay an outstanding tax bill within, on the phone there and then, and because I knew it was a scam, but I thought I'll keep them on the line for as long as possible, because if they're not going to defraud me, then
yeah.
at least I'm stopping them trying to attack somebody else. So but there was various things they tried to make me do. I had to go to different websites and check the number they were phoning from, and I knew that that could be spoofed, but still they said, oh, look at the number that we're phoning you from. That's the number on this court website, and then they tried to get me to download various different banking apps and things to transfer the money. But they always had a reason as to why you had to do these slightly strange things.
Yeah.
The script that they had obviously had built in the fact that there was you might get some pushback from the person, but ultimately the aim was to try and get me to transfer money. So I think 40 minutes in, they were disappointed that I finally refused to do so.
That's pretty good. I have a hard time keeping anyone on the phone for more than about 5 or 10 minutes before they get frustrated with me.
Yeah, I think they were very they must have thought that I was definitely going to be transferring them something. So I managed to keep them engaged for a decent amount of time.
Yeah, but it is interesting. I mean, I don't think it's just in the UK. I think just as humans, we're wired to want to be supportive. We want to respect perceived authority, and we don't want to be the stone in the road, the thorn in someone's side, and so it's just easier to go along than to question someone, challenge somebody, and ask questions.
Exactly, yes, and I think it feels unnatural to say no, but actually, the criminal is trying to prey on that really, and to take advantage of people's naturally trusting instincts, and the key thing is to to step back from that, and to stop when you are challenged, sorry, when you are asked for information, to stop and think, actually that's not right, and then push back, and say, I'm not going to give you that information. I'm not going to transfer you that money. I'm not sure that you are who you say you are, and I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. And I've had that conversation where when you challenge them, they get mad and start screaming and yelling and like, well, you
Yes,
you
exactly.
you definitely don't work for the bank because you would have been
Exactly.
fired.
Absolutely. I've been sworn at sometimes by an investment scammer who didn't like that I wouldn't sign up to their service. So and I'm pretty certain, as you say, that no genuine organization would would allow their staff to start swearing at their customers.
Yes, and I think the third point was protect.
Absolutely, yes. So the sort of the last step really is that if a customer does think, or somebody does think that they've fallen victim to a scam, or lost money in a scam, to contact their bank straight away. For two reasons. Firstly, because as we talked about earlier, the bank, the earlier you can speak to them, they can hopefully try and recover some of those stolen funds, but also protect your account as well for any other potential frauds. And it's not just about if you have already transfer money, it's also about giving away information too,
Yeah.
because that information can be really powerful for the criminal to attempt to sort of get into your account as well, and then report it through to the service in the UK called Action Fraud, and that's the police has, it's their central reporting point for fraud in the UK, and that helps them build the picture of fraud, what's going on, and go after those criminals.
Do you find that most of the fraud is originating from outside of the UK?
Um, from not necessarily from outside the UK, but most of it definitely originates online.
Hmm.
Roughly 70% or so of authorized push payment scams start out online. And then that may then sort of move into a different sphere when it moves into the telephone or others. But the sort of the starting point is often is online and on social media in particular as well.
Gotcha. Do you see any particular demographics of individuals that are being targeted more than others? I know we often talk about, uh, I think the normal narrative is that the elderly are more likely to become victims of fraud, but there seems to be some pushback on that reasoning these days, and actually millennials and Gen X are just as likely to fall for fraud than the seniors.
Yeah, I think, I mean, in a way, fraud can happen to anybody, unfortunately. And it sometimes slightly depends on the type of fraud as to who might be slightly more susceptible to that particular type. So, investment scams, for example, may be slightly older people with more money to invest, for
Yeah.
example. But what we do see, though, is that often those younger age groups are more willing to share information. We see that often young people are more confident at thinking they can spot scams, which potentially put them at risk of being sort of, overconfident, but naturally sharing information, more used to sharing information online about themselves. And again, that can put them at risk, sharing that personal information. It can be that younger age group, as you say, that can be susceptible from that point of view. But very much we see fraud unfortunately impacting all age groups, and there isn't a particular sort of target for the criminal. They're indiscriminate, really.
Yeah.
They'll try to get to anybody who they can try and get money out of.
Yeah, I guess if you're selling fake tickets to some band, uh, it'll target the same demographics that the band targets, regardless.
Exactly,
So,
exactly that, exactly. Yeah.
yeah, sometimes I kind of get the perspective that younger people are more likely to fall for kind of those payment scams because they're used to doing online transactions. People my age are used to, if someone has borrowed money from you, you give it back to them in cash. You're not just
Yes, exactly. Yes,
using the peer-to-peer payment apps is less common the older that you get.
I think that's probably right. Yes, but using different ways to different sort of online marketplaces and things like that, which are potentially more susceptible to or to scams and those purchase scams. So that can be definitely a danger there for younger people.
Gotcha. And as part of doing the podcast, I often ask my guests if they've been a victim of a scam or if they have a family member that's been a victim of a scam, because I know that there's so much fear about, oh my gosh, an embarrassment of being fallen for a scam. I really try to destigmatize that having happened, and I've fallen for a scam or two in my life, and I'm willing to admit that. Um, Not everybody has. So have you fallen for a scam, or had a family member fall for a scam?
Thankfully, so far, no, I haven't. But I certainly have had numerous sort of scam approaches. With the phone calls I talked about earlier from the tax office, pretending there was a warrant out for my arrest. But I regularly get scam messages, offers of supposed employment from various organizations which clearly don't really exist, offering really high amounts of money per day to for a job, and all I need to do is sort of give my details and away I go. So no, I thankfully haven't as yet, but certainly do get approached quite regularly by, as I'm sure many people do, with whether that's text messages, emails, phone calls. I think there's a regular communication through from potential criminals.
Yeah, so I think everybody is getting poked at and prodded at a regular basis, whether we realize it or not. It's constantly ongoing.
Absolutely.
Do you see any kind of trends that are concerning you as to where the fraud attempts are going?
I mean, I think the probably the key bit is the fact that more and more is taking place online, really. So that's
Mhm.
you know the place where the fraud we see is it originates, and I think as more people as people increasingly use the online for more parts of their day-to-day life, then that naturally means that there's more chance there for criminals. So I think that's probably the thing that we see, is in the broadest sense. But there are always different types of scams that are emerging and different changing methods that the criminals are using. One quite common one recently in the UK is around what we call the kind of the mum and dad scam. So that is where the criminal is sending somebody a message claiming that it's their son or daughter, really. So it's a message saying, "Oh, my phone's broken. Here's my new number.
Yeah.
But don't try and call because I haven't got the phone. It's not working yet for some reason. And but please, can you send me some cash because I need to pay. I need to pay for the new phone." There's some kind of claim that they're making as to why they need to get money, and unfortunately, again, that is having some effect here in the UK.
Yeah, that's definitely been going around in the U.S. for a while. It seems to be target here. It seems to be targeting grandparents more than parents.
Yes, yeah,
So it the the scammers will change their tactics when one scam stops working. They just switch to a different tool in the tool belt, and
absolutely,
they'll
yes,
always take advantage of whatever the latest news is, whatever the latest trends are. If there's a yeah,
absolutely,
not that there's going to be a Beatles concert, but if there's a popular concert, Adele's coming to town, they'll target
exactly,
people with that and do whatever they can, or you know, natural disasters. They try to leverage on that. It's just awful, everything that they're
absolutely
going
right.
after. So if people want to find out more about the fraud campaign and read in more details, where can people go for that?
So we have our website is take5-stopfraud.org.uk. So that's got lots of different advice on different types of scams and how to protect yourself. We've got a sort of interactive quiz on there as well, so you can test your sort of scam spotting skills to see how you fare on that front as well. So that's the best place to go for advice on how to stay safe.
Awesome. Any parting wisdom before we wrap up today?
I think the key thing is, I think I've mentioned it already, but stop, challenge, protect. I think those, if you take that moment to stop and think whenever asked for your personal information or money, I think that's a really good way of just helping to protect yourself from fraud and scams. So, stopping and thinking, I think that's the two key things to do.
Critical thinking is a great thing to teach people, whether it's about scams or about other stuff. I
Absolutely,
love encouraging people to think critically.
absolutely.
Giles, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Prey podcast today.
Welcome. Thank you so much for having me.